Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Teri Roche Drobnick. She's here today to talk about her debut picture book, Moving Day. This delightful book tells the tale of moving homes from an unexpected perspective, the house itself. As a child who has moved many, many times, I appreciated the attention to this topic, and I had some fun moving with house along the way too. I have a special place in my KidLit Love heart for debut books, so we're just going to jump right to this conversation. Teri, welcome to KidLit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I am thrilled to be here, especially since I've heard your voice in my head so many times. As I walk, I listen to your podcast, so I feel like I already know you.
Oh, that makes me feel so good. I love that. And I'm super excited because you just celebrated the book birthday of Moving Day 2 days ago, at least from when we're airing this episode. So this is a very special week, and I'm so glad that KidLit Love is part of your launch.
Yes, it's so exciting. You write these books and then it takes forever for them to come out and to hold it for the first time. And, I'm planning my launch. My launch is this Saturday at our local bookseller, Copperfields. I'm beyond excited.
Yeah. Oh, well, congratulations. And thank you for coming on
Thank
today
you.
to talk all about it. Before we get to your book, though, I of course want to start with you. I would love to know your backstory, especially as a debut author. I just love hearing how people got here. So it's your debut book, but it's certainly not your debut in writing. You actually have a memoir that is out too. So I'd love for you to give us the details about you and your work and how you came to Kid Lit.
Yeah, well, my memoir is out on submission, so it is not yet published. Um, but yes, I've written quite a few picture books, and my agent has submitted them, and hopefully this is the first of many. But I started out as a clinical social worker, so this is way kind of out of my comfort zone. I worked in the medical field for many years, and then I was home with my two daughters, um, being the soccer mom
Mhm.
and, you know, driving them here and there. Um, and during that time, I started a little boutique business making rag dolls. I made these little quirky rag dolls out of reclaimed clothing and I hand stitched them. And then I sold them on Etsy and in boutiques and shops. And quite a few of my friends said, Teri, you should be writing stories about these quirky characters. And so I started thinking about it. I thought that would be really fun. So I started out by writing about a superhero character. That story never got picked up, but that was my entree into writing about or writing children's picture books. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. No idea. It was a steep learning curve. How to write an entire book in 500 words or less, how to show, don't tell, how to get a message within the book to the kids without preaching to them. There are so many things to consider and allowing room for the illustrator to tell part of the story. Um, so I had to learn all of that. I took classes, I joined critique groups, I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I went to conferences. I did all the things that I needed to do and then slowly started submitting my manuscripts. I queried agents and I sent my manuscripts to publishing houses that accepted unsolicited manuscripts. In other words, if you don't have an agent, some publishing houses accept manuscripts from you, but they go directly to the slush pile, and you're really lucky if they're ever seen. So I finally landed an agent after a couple years. I met him at a conference, and about a year or two after that, he sold Moving Day. So, and that was 4 years ago that the book was sold, and it's just now coming out. So it has been a roller coaster ride of rejections. Um, but if there are any aspiring writers out there, I just have to say, keep at it. Don't give up. It's so worth it in the end.
Yeah. I think we've got a nice mix of listeners, at least from what I know, where there are educators in the audience, there are librarians in the audience, there are
Right.
parents, and there are aspiring kidlit writers as well. And so I know they appreciate those nuggets of wisdom and the reminder that this could be a long path. And that's doesn't mean it's a negative thing on you. It just happens to be how it is. So I always appreciate that realness that every kidlit author who has come here has said. It's a windy, long road, right? There are no overnight successes. There's many years of that in the making. And I think it just makes readers appreciate how how much it took to get the story into our hands. I know I have from doing this podcast. They're even more precious to me when I hold them. And I imagine
Yeah.
it's even more precious to you, certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had no idea how long it would take. And yeah, 4 years I think is kind of exceptionally long. Part of it was my agent sold the book during the height of COVID. So everything was kind of moving slowly in the publishing world. And then my illustrator, Jennifer Black Reinhardt, does all the work by hand. So we had to wait for her as well. But again, well worth the wait.
Yes.
Her illustrations are amazing. The pen and watercolor illustrations just make the story come alive. I couldn't be more pleased. And my editor, Margaret Ferguson, at Margaret Ferguson Books at Holiday House, I think, she's been in the industry a long time and she was a dream to work with, but she also knows how to pair the story and the illustrations with, you know, author and illustrator. And I think she did a great job because the story is a little quirky and fun, and Jennifer just threw in the whimsicality, and it worked perfect.
It did. It did. And I would love to talk even more about that aspect of the book a little bit later because I do think it just brings the book and the story to life. But I do want to ask you how did you go from those really amazing sounding dolls with you should tell stories about them, and you mentioned other stories that you started with. How how did you, I guess I could say for Moving Day, um, kind of arrive on this topic, or how do you think of those topics that you might want to write about?
Yeah, it's funny because the first several manuscripts I wrote were about my little T-Socks rag dolls, and they were about superheroes. Those never got picked up. They were my first try at writing picture books, and when I look back on them now, it's like, okay, I've learned a lot since then. Um, but every conference I've ever been to, they always say, know what you or write what you know. And so a lot of these topics are very close to my heart. I think my social work background definitely influences my writing. I've written about LGBTQ, I've written about dementia. My father had Alzheimer's, my grandmother did. Um, I've written about chronic illness because I had Lyme disease for many years. I've written about death and dying. And this particular topic came to the forefront because a friend of mine sent me a news clip of this house being moved. And I saw it, and she said, this would be a perfect picture book. And, many people had sent me ideas before that, and nothing really resonated. But this story, I thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be fun if it was told from the house's perspective to bring it down to a young child's level. The house can be nervous and afraid and go through ups and downs on the move. And it also was inspired by the fact that my daughter at the age of 5 was very resistant to moving. We only moved like a half a mile away, but she didn't want to leave the neighborhood. She didn't want to leave the house. And then my father, in his early 80s, he had dementia, and we knew that we needed to move him, but he did not want to move from our family home where he raised all us kids. So it's not just a kid issue or story. It's something that I think everyone can understand, and it will resonate with them. Yeah.
I completely agree. And as you know, the whole spirit of the podcast is yes, children's books are for children, but every adult has an inner child. Every adult needs
Absolutely.
them too. And
Yes.
as I was reading it, I was connecting back to my own childhood experience. As I mentioned in the opening of the episode, I moved a lot. Like a lot. Not, not that we were a military family or anything. We just happened to move a lot from like you said, half a mile or a mile as families grow and change. And
Right. Right.
it became something that I got really used to, but I remember those I don't want to go or packing up and here we go again. And what's it going to be like at the new place, at the new school, at all of the things, all of the worries, all of the stresses of moving house experiences, right?
Yes.
In a different way that allows you to connect to it, but also to stand on the outside of it and realize house is going to be okay. And I'm going to be okay, or I will
Yes.
be, or I was. And I really loved how you choosing to have it from the house's perspective allows the reader to see that.
Yeah. Well, and the other fun part of telling this story is that it is based on a real life house. It's based on the story of the Englander house that was relocated in 2021, the same year I wrote the book. Um, and a developer decided he was going to build condominiums in that spot, and he didn't want to tear down the house. So he decided to relocate it. But relocating a house in a big city like San Francisco is not an easy task. It took him like 8 years. He had to work with 15 different agencies because they had to um, take down street signs. They had to clip branches of trees. They had to remove all the cars that were parked on the sides of the road. I mean, it was a big and expensive undertaking.
Mhm.
And then when he finally found a lot big enough for this house, it wasn't quite wide enough. So the mortuary next door, which he also purchased, he had to move to the left
Oh my
in
God.
order to make room for this house. So it was, and San Francisco initially weren't going to let him do this, but then a new city planner came on board and agreed to the whole project. So, yeah, it was a big deal. And, as I describe in the book, that there were people on the side applauding and clapping every time it turned a corner, it came down a hill. That's exactly what it was like. It was like a parade.
Yeah. I loved knowing that at the end. I didn't know it going into the book that it was, based on this real life experience, which I love because then I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole and went on your website and there's more information and it really could come alive. But it's making me smile because it's someone who clearly didn't want to move from that home, who did everything possible in order to move it to that location, which can't always be done. I think maybe it was on your website, can't always be done depending on how the house was built. And so what an exciting thing
Right,
to be
right.
able to think.
Well, and fortunately in San Francisco, the houses are lighter. If a lot of those older homes are built with redwood. In the East Coast, they're mostly built with brick
Right.
and they have to take them apart to move them. Whereas these houses are light enough, they're still extremely heavy, but they're light enough to move. And even before automobiles were invented, they would cut the houses in half and pull them by horses, which is mind-boggling. I mean, this dates back to the 1800s. There were many reasons why they moved these houses, either transportation or, um, building of roadways or, multiple reasons for having to move them. Yeah.
I love when books can just light your curiosity like that. Right.
Yeah.
Something that you
Yeah.
didn't know just leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, all while couched in this really fun, delightful story. I mean, house is, technically an inanimate object, but
Mhm.
because of the images, because of what happens in the story, just becomes this character with facial expressions and movements and things that you just are rooting for as you see House go through all the range of emotions and all the ups and downs, as you mentioned, taking down street signs and cutting branches, just like we have to get rid of some things and pack other things and condense down. It was
Yes.
just such a delightful little road trip
Oh,
for
thank you,
for the
Stephanie.
reader. Oh, you're so welcome.
Well, and Jennifer, I had no idea that the house was going to have legs and arms. And when I saw the first illustration of that, I went crazy. It just was so cute. And the striped stockings and the bushes on either side of the house,
Yes.
turning into the carpet bags that the house carries along the journey. Um, yeah, she really was able to make that house come alive.
She did. I think that is probably one of my favorite pages is the bags, the house moving along and has the purse, the carpet bag, the suitcase, whatever. That
Yes,
is just one of my favorite images that just made me smile from the book. But the book is filled with pages exactly like that. I think actually if I had to pick one of my favorite, I really, really love the street views of all of those
yes.
different houses and the
The beautiful houses.
icon.
Jennifer, the illustrator who lives in Iowa, came out to San Francisco to study the houses and the architecture. And there are rows of houses called the Painted Ladies. And they're Victorian houses of all different beautiful colors. And she studied them and she incorporated those into the book. The illustration where the house is really tiny at the top of this big long hill and the houses are lined up on the side. You can really tell that she had been to San Francisco and studied the architecture.
I just loved browsing it. I think I I spent multiple minutes just looking
Oh,
at all the details on those pages. And I'm so glad you brought up because I wondered if this was completely done by hand because of this
everything.
feel of the book that not all picture books have, depending on the medium and how they create it. There is a very like old world charm to
Yeah.
to the book.
Yes, that's something as a writer, I'm sure I'm not the only one. When you write a picture book, you think, well, I hope I like the illustrator because in a traditional picture book scenario, the editor is the one that chooses and hires the illustrator. And Margaret, my editor, did ask if I had any ideas for illustrators, and I was like, yay, yes, I have been dying for someone to ask me that. And I had a whole spreadsheet of illustrators. So I went through each name and looked at their illustrations and narrowed it down to three that I thought would fit with this book. And she said, okay, these are good choices, but here's who I'm thinking of.
I was just going to
And
say, was she one of them or was this a magical?
no, I didn't know about Jennifer before this. And once I saw Jennifer's work, it was a no-brainer. And interestingly, I my favorite medium is pen and watercolor. I love the look of that and the details that she was able to put into the book, like a little mouse in a window or, a mermaid on the weather vane. Um, I mean, you could look at these pictures forever and find new details in them.
Mhm. I did.
So,
I did
yeah,
exactly that
yeah.
multiple
And
times.
I have a daughter who's an artist, so I feel like I'm very particular about art. So, to really fall in love with my illustrator's work was a dream, truly.
Yeah. It is one of those books that I think if we think of our shelves at home, that we usually line up all of our books with the spines facing out. This is one that you want the cover facing forward, like
Yes.
bookstore style. You
Yes.
want this one facing out because it is just so the cover is so inviting when you're looking at that home. And then you remember as a reader what are in those pages, and it is just a, I think you said whimsical earlier, it's like a old school whimsical invitation to just snuggle into that neighborhood and the
Right,
streets.
right. Dive right
Listeners,
in
you
and
have
be
to
a
see it.
part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can't do it justice talking about it like listeners really do. You just need to go, you need to go look at it, you need to get it, you need to go look at it.
Yeah, I've gotten great feedback from people who have seen the book and just rave about the illustrations. So it's very exciting.
Editor knew what she was doing, pairing the
She
two.
knew what she was doing. Absolutely. Yeah.
So as you celebrate your book birthday, just, you know, very very new and recent, which I always love that we can air the episode right along the launch. What is your hope for readers as they pick up this book and read this book? What are you hoping that they'll walk away with or take away from the book and the experience of reading it?
Yeah. Well, the love of reading is first and foremost, I think for any writer, especially a writer of children, I hope that it will engage the kids, that they will love reading it, that they will read it over and over again so that their parents get sick of it.
Yes.
I just, that's a dream come true. I hope the kids who are going through a move or any kind of change will realize that change can be good, that moving can be good. Um, Moving for families can, create a bond for them. The kids can make new friends and become more confident because they have done a move and readjusted. And I think the most important thing that this book says or shows, actually, without saying it, is that it doesn't really matter where you are, but who you're with. And as long as that family was with that house, the house knew it was going to be okay.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you talked about that because that feeling is so evident. And that
Good.
lesson, so to speak, is so evident at the end of the book through what happens, through the journey, through the illustrations. I think that is a beautiful landing place, like literally and figuratively for
Right. Right. Yeah, well, and I would love to write a continuation of this book, about what it's like to be new to the neighborhood. So we'll see. We'll
oh,
see. I think my editor wants to see how this book does before committing to a second. But yeah, I mean, I have other books that I'm writing and that are out on submission, but that would be a fun one to work on as well.
that would be. It would be a beautiful continuation. But since you mentioned it, can you give us any sneak peeks or like anything
Well,
about what you're working on?
yes, I recently went to New York and went to the JP Morgan Library. Um, and I was there were so many beautiful books. It was just so exciting to see, and I that inspired me to write a book, which I can't really say anything about, but it definitely was inspirational. I've also got a new book, a fractured fairy tale about the three little pigs and the big bad wolf, and another story that I've gotten some great feedback from editors, but no one's picked up yet. So that's out there. My agent has submitted a lot of older stories, so who knows? Some of those may get picked up. Um, but I also have my memoir out there, and it's called A Daughter's Long Goodbye: Anticipatory Grief and Friendships Stronger Than Alzheimer's. And it's really a love story to my father who died of Alzheimer's. And so I took 3 years off of writing my picture books in order to write the memoir because, again, a huge learning curve. I had finally learned how to write an entire story in 500 words or less. And now I was expected to write 60,000 words. It was daunting, but it is finished. And because it's finished and out on submission, I get to go back to writing my picture books, which is my true love.
Yeah. So, where can listeners find you online so that they can follow you and see what books might be coming next and certainly get their hands on Moving Day?
Yes, well, moving day can be obtained anywhere books are sold. And my website is a great place to connect with me. I really adore connecting with readers. So, and that's Teri Drobnick, TeriDrobnick.com. And there are links to my social media and to my Substack newsletter. So you can go directly to Substack, you can go directly to Instagram, X, or Facebook. And if you put in my name, my handle will come up. Yeah.
Well, I'll be sure to collect all of those links and I will put them into the show notes and certainly put
Thank
links to where everybody can get Moving Day
Yeah.
as well. Thank you. Thank you for coming on, telling us all about Moving Day, all about your writing, what we get to look forward to in the future. It was such a nice conversation.
It was such a pleasure to be here with you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.